I never thought my wedding night, the night every girl dreams about, would be the moment that changed my life forever. Not because of love, or romance, or those small magical moments people talk about. But because I made a small, innocent mistake, a childish prank. And it led me to discover something I was never supposed to hear. Even today, whenever I think about it, I feel a soft ache in my chest. Not sharp, not angry, just a quiet, lingering sadness. The kind that sits inside you and doesn't really leave. My story begins with a smile. A real one. The kind a new bride has when she believes the future is glowing in front of her. I remember stepping into the room after the ceremony. My hands were still trembling with excitement. My dress was heavy, but my heart felt light. Everyone had told me I had married a good man, gentle, respectful, someone who would keep me happy. And I believed them. The room smelled like fresh flowers. Soft fairy lights were wrapped around the bed frame. It looked warm, peaceful, almost like a dream. I sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, feeling the newness of it all, new home, new life, new beginning. My husband, Azan, stepped out for a few minutes to speak with his mother. And in that silence, a playful thought came into my mind, one that now feels foolish, but at the time, it made me giggle like a child. I whispered to myself. Let me hide under the bed and scare him when he walks in. It was innocent, harmless, something I thought he would laugh about later, that I wasn't a mischievous person normally, but the excitement of the day made me feel light and silly. So I lifted the curtain of the bed, slid quietly underneath, and held my breath, trying not to laugh. The floor felt cold under my palms. My heart beat loudly. It felt like a fun little secret between us. A memory we would laugh about one day. But instead of my husband's footsteps, instead of his warm voice, instead of the start of our new life together,
someone else walked in. Soft steps. A slow breath. A voice I recognized, but not from closeness. From distance. It was my sister-in-law. And the moment she spoke, everything inside me became still, like the world had stopped moving. I remember her voice clearly. Calm. Too calm. She doesn't know the truth, but she will, someday. At first, I didn't understand. My mind tried to piece together what she meant. I stayed quiet, thinking maybe she was talking on the phone. But then I heard another voice enter the room. A man. Soft. Familiar. My husband. And what he said next, gently, without guilt, was the moment the floor beneath me turned cold in a way I never imagined. Let her remain in the dark tonight. Tomorrow is soon enough. My breath caught in my throat. I felt the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. What truth? What darkness? What was I not supposed to know? My wedding night was no longer a dream. It had become a door to something painful, something I wasn't prepared for. And I stayed there, under the bed, too afraid to move, too afraid to breathe, too afraid to hear the rest, but unable to stop myself that I grew up believing marriage was the joining of two souls, two families, two futures. My parents had a simple relationship. Nothing fancy, nothing dramatic. They taught me that kindness could solve most problems, and silence could soften most storms. So when I agreed to marry Azan, I entered this house with a hopeful heart. I wasn't expecting luxury or perfection. I only wished for peace, companionship, maybe a gentle hand to hold mine through life. In the weeks leading to the wedding, everything felt warm and welcoming. His family treated me kindly. His mother smiled at me often, though sometimes I felt a flicker of something unreadable behind her eyes. His sister, Lana, was polite, always composed, always careful with her words. And Azan. He was quiet. Soft-spoken. The kind of man who rarely raised his voice. Whenever we met, he asked simple questions. Did you eat? Are you comfortable? Was the journey long? Nothing personal. Nothing emotional. But I told myself he was simply shy. Not every man expresses himself easily. And I didn't need grand gestures. Just honesty. Just a little warmth. But now, lying under that bed on my wedding night, listening to two people whisper about a truth I didn't know, I felt something I had never felt before. A quiet fear. The kind that doesn't scream, it settles. Slowly. Heavily. I tried to steady my breathing. I didn't want them to hear me. I didn't want them to know I was there. I wasn't ready to face anything. Not yet. Not in the first hour of my marriage. Lana spoke again, her voice low. You should have told her before the wedding. Azan sighed. I couldn't. Mother said it would ruin everything. Ruin everything. Everything. The word echoed in my mind. What was this everything? Why would the truth ruin it? And why was their mother involved? I stared at the floorboards inches from my face. The hem of my wedding dress brushed against my cheek. My hands felt cold. I pressed my palm over my heart, trying to calm it. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it wasn't about me. Maybe I misunderstood. But then Lana whispered, she deserves to know who you really wanted to marry. My heart stopped. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. Maybe it was the fabric muffling the sound. Maybe my imagination twisted her words. But Azan's silence confirmed it. A heavy silence. A silence that felt like a quiet confession. My throat tightened. I thought of all the times I asked him if he was happy with this marriage. He always answered politely, it is good. It will be good. At the time, I had smiled, thinking he was nervous. But now, those words sounded different. After a few seconds, he finally spoke. What is the point of telling her now? The wedding is done. The wedding is done. As if I were a decision finalized on paper, not a person standing at the start of her new life. Lana sighed. Still, she will eventually know. I shut my eyes, wishing I could disappear. I didn't want to hear more. I didn't want to imagine another woman standing in my place, someone he loved, someone he wanted, someone he dreamed about. My hands trembled, and I held them tightly together to stop the shaking. I told myself to stay still until they left. I told myself I would deal with whatever this was later, when my mind was clearer, when I wasn't lying under a bed like a child hiding from a storm. After a minute, I heard the door open. Their footsteps faded. The soft click of the door closing echoed through the room. And still, I didn't move. I stayed under the bed for several minutes, staring at the darkness, feeling my breath rise and fall. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was simply still. Like someone who had walked into a moment they weren't emotionally prepared for. Eventually, I slid out from under the bed. My dress scratched against the floor. My legs felt weak as I stood up. I smoothed my clothes, wiped a bit of dust from my hands, and sat on the edge of the bed again. The fairy lights around the bed looked dimmer now, even though they hadn't changed. The room didn't feel warm anymore. It felt unfamiliar. Like I had stepped into someone else's life. I stared at the door, half expecting Azan to walk in. I wondered if he would look guilty, or nervous, or maybe completely normal, as if nothing had happened. I didn't know how I would react. I didn't want to confront him. I didn't want to start my marriage with questions and tension. I wasn't ready to break anything before it even began. So I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly. When Azan finally entered the room, he smiled politely, unaware of what I had heard. His eyes were calm, his voice gentle. Are you tired? He asked. I nodded softly, but inside, my mind. As if I were a decision finalized on paper, not a person standing at the start of her new life. Lana sighed. Still, she will eventually know. I shut my eyes, wishing I could disappear. I didn't want to hear more. I didn't want to imagine another woman standing in my place, someone he loved, someone he wanted, someone he dreamed about. My hands trembled, and I held them tightly together to stop the shaking. I told myself to stay still until they left. I told myself I would deal with whatever this was later, when my mind was clearer, when I wasn't lying under a bed like a child hiding from a storm. After a minute, I heard the door open. Their footsteps faded. The soft click of the door closing echoed through the room. And still, I didn't move. I stayed under the bed for several minutes, staring at the darkness, feeling my breath rise and fall. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I was simply still. Like someone who had walked into a moment they weren't emotionally prepared for. Eventually, I slid out from under the bed. My dress scratched against the floor. My legs felt weak as I stood up. I smoothed my clothes, wiped a bit of dust from my hands, and sat on the edge of the bed again. The fairy lights around the bed looked dimmer now, even though they hadn't changed. The room didn't feel warm anymore. It felt unfamiliar. Like I had stepped into someone else's life. I stared at the door, half expecting Azan to walk in. I wondered if he would look guilty, or nervous, or maybe completely normal, as if nothing had happened. I didn't know how I would react. I didn't want to confront him. I didn't want to start my marriage with questions and tension. I wasn't ready to break anything before it even began. So I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly. When Azan finally entered the room, he smiled politely, unaware of what I had heard. His eyes were calm, his voice gentle. "Are you tired?" he asked. I nodded softly, but inside, my mind whispered a different truth. I am tired, but not from the wedding. I was tired from understanding that my marriage might not be the story I imagined. And yet, I still hoped, desperately, that maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I heard wrong. Maybe he loved me in ways I hadn't seen yet. Hope can be foolish, but it can also be comforting. And that night, I clung to it quietly. The next morning, sunlight filled the room gently, as if trying to comfort me. But the warmth on my skin could not calm the quiet heaviness inside my chest. I woke up slowly, hoping, for a brief second, that maybe everything I heard last night was only a dream. But when I looked at Azan, lying beside me, breathing softly, the memory returned with full clarity. His calm face, the steady rise and fall of his chest, none of it showed the storm sitting silently inside me. I slipped out of bed quietly, letting my feet touch the cold floor. My dress was folded neatly on the sofa. Someone, probably his mother, had come in early to tidy the room. It felt intrusive, yet I didn't have the strength to think about it. When I went downstairs, the house was awake. His mother, Safia, stood in the kitchen preparing tea. She smiled when she saw me. "Good morning, dear. How was your night?" Her voice sounded warm, almost too warm. The kind of warmth people use when they're hiding something underneath. I forced a soft smile. "It was good," I whispered. She nodded happily, as if my answer confirmed something inside her. Lana entered the kitchen moments later. When her eyes met mine, I noticed the slightest shift in her expression, a moment of hesitation. Maybe guilt. Maybe worry. Maybe she wondered if I had heard anything. She greeted me softly. "Good morning." I replied with a smile much smaller than hers. "Good morning." We sat for breakfast. The food tasted fine, but I barely noticed the flavors. I kept watching their faces instead, how they looked at each other, how they avoided certain topics. How the silence in the room felt heavier than normal morning quietness. Azan joined us a little later. He looked composed, as always. "Did you sleep well?" he asked me gently. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. If I spoke too much, my voice might tremble. If I asked a single question, everything would fall apart. We spent the morning with relatives who came to give blessings and gifts, and the day passed like a blur of smiles, photos, and polite conversations. I behaved normally. I greeted everyone. I smiled when needed. But inside, a question kept echoing. Who did he want to marry? And why wasn't I told? There were moments when I caught Lana watching me, as if studying my reactions. Moments when Safia spoke to me with excessive kindness, almost as if trying to distract me. And moments when Azan seemed distant, thoughtful, like he had something on his mind. In the afternoon, after everyone left, I finally found a quiet moment in the garden. I sat on a wooden bench under a tree, clasping my hands together, letting the silence settle around me. I wasn't trying to solve the mystery. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I was simply trying to understand my own heart. I asked myself simple questions. Am I hurt? Yes. Am I angry? No, not exactly. Am I afraid of the truth? Yes. I was afraid that knowing too much would change everything. I was afraid that his heart might never open for me. I was afraid that I would spend my life beside someone whose love belonged to another woman. As I sat there, footsteps approached quietly. Azan joined me on the bench, keeping a respectful distance. You look tired, he said softly. It's just the wedding, I replied. There was a pause. A gentle, fragile pause. I know this is new for you, he continued. But I hope you are comfortable here. Everyone is kind, I said. He nodded. Good. Another pause followed. He didn't look directly at me, but I could sense he wanted to say something more. His fingers tapped lightly on his knee, a sign of nervousness I had never seen before. I waited. Gently. Quietly. Finally, he whispered, there are things I wish I could explain. But I don't want to burden you. My heart tightened. He wants to explain, but he won't. He has something to say, but he's holding back. Why? Why now? I turned to him slowly. You can tell me anything. I'm your wife now. He offered a faint smile, thin and uncertain. In time, maybe. The word maybe felt like a small crack in the wall between us. He stood up after a few minutes, saying he had errands to run. I watched him walk back toward the house, his shoulders slightly slumped, not obvious, but enough for me to notice. When he disappeared inside, I sat alone again. The garden's silence felt soothing, yet my thoughts grew heavier. Later that evening, when I returned to our room, I found something placed neatly on the bedside table, a small brown envelope. It had no name, no writing. Just a plain envelope. I froze. I looked around. The room was empty. The curtains were drawn. The lights were dim. I walked closer, slowly, as if approaching something fragile. When I opened the envelope, I found a photograph. Azan, standing beside a woman I had never seen before. His smile was real. His eyes brighter than I had ever seen. Her hand rested on his arm. Both looked happy. Too happy. My breath caught in my throat. I turned the photo over. On the back, someone had written a small date, just 6 months before our wedding. 6 months, not years. Not long ago. Just 6 months. My knees felt weak. I sat on the bed, holding the photograph like it was something that might break. Who left this here? Did someone want me to know? Or was this an accident? My mind raced quietly, not with fear, but with a slow, sinking sadness that I traced the edge of the photo with my thumb. The woman looked beautiful. Confident. Comfortable beside him. As if they shared a story I knew nothing about. And in that moment, I felt something I wasn't prepared for. Maybe, she was the one he wanted to marry. Maybe I was the replacement. Maybe the truth I wasn't supposed to know was standing right here in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't make any sound. I simply sat there, feeling the weight of a love story that wasn't mine. A love story I had stepped into, without knowing it had already ended for someone else, that I held the photograph for a long time, letting the silence of the room press around me. There was something strangely gentle about the quiet, as if the walls knew I needed a moment to breathe. I placed the picture on my lap, smoothing its edges with trembling fingers. The woman's smile was soft, real, almost glowing. She looked at Azan the way someone looks at a person they deeply trust. There was warmth in her eyes, warmth I hadn't yet seen in his when he looked at me. For a moment, I wondered what their story had been. Was she a friend? A lover? Someone he had planned to marry before circumstances changed? The more I looked at the picture, the more a dull ache began to grow in my chest. Not sharp, not dramatic, just a deep, slow ache. I placed the photo back into the envelope and hid it inside my drawer. Not to forget it, but because I wasn't ready to face anyone with questions I didn't know how to ask. That evening, when Azan returned to the room, I watched him quietly. He removed his watch, placed it neatly on the table, and loosened his tie. He looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally tired. A kind of tiredness that comes from carrying something heavy inside, day after day. I wondered if he was thinking about her. I wondered if he had loved her enough for the memory to still hurt. He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his forehead. Something inside me softened. Despite my confusion and quiet hurt, I didn't wish pain for him. I didn't want to judge him harshly. I simply wanted to understand. Long day? I asked softly. He looked up, surprised I had spoken first. Yes, he replied. A lot on my mind. I nodded gently. I didn't ask what those thoughts were. I didn't push for answers. If he was not ready, I didn't want to force him. But the silence between us was becoming too heavy, settling like dust on everything we said and didn't say. He glanced at me for a moment. You seem quiet today. I smiled faintly. Just adjusting. He accepted the answer, though his eyes lingered on me a bit longer, as if he sensed there was more but didn't know how to ask. Later, when he stepped into the bathroom, I stood near the window, looking at the evening sky. The sun had dipped low, leaving soft shades of pink and orange. A breeze moved the curtains gently, carrying the distant sound of children playing somewhere outside. Life went on around me, normally, peacefully. Yet I felt strangely alone. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Just quietly alone inside a story I hadn't chosen. Right before dinner, Safia knocked on our door. She looked pleased about something, though her smile didn't reach her eyes. We are eating together tonight, she said warmly. Family dinners are important in this house. I nodded and followed her downstairs. The dining table was set beautifully, silver plates, warm dishes, soft lighting. It looked perfect, too perfect. The kind of perfection that hides tension beneath it. Lana joined us a moment later, sitting across from me. Her eyes flicked to mine briefly, then away. Azan sat beside his father, who spoke little but watched everything. Halfway through the meal, Safia placed an extra dish near my plate. This is Azan's favorite, she said with a gentle smile. You should learn how to make it. He likes when his wife cooks for him. Her words were simple, but there was a layer underneath them. Expectation. Responsibility. Pressure. I will learn, I replied quietly. Lana spoke then, her voice carefully light. Mother, let her settle in first. She just got here yesterday. Safia frowned slightly. It's important she understands her duties from the beginning. Duties. The word sat heavily in the air. I kept my eyes on my plate. I didn't want any tension. I didn't want to start anything. But inside, I felt a small tightening, like the walls of the house were gently closing in. After dinner, as we prepared to leave the table, the unexpected happened. A message alert sounded from the living room. Lana quickly picked up her phone, but it wasn't her device. It was Azan's. The screen lit up with a notification. Just a name. A simple, familiar name. The name of the woman from the photograph. My breath stopped for a second. My hands grew still. Lana froze too, eyes widening for the slightest moment before she quickly handed the phone to him. "Your message," she said, voice controlled. Azan took the phone calmly, but something flickered in his expression, just for a split second. Something almost like worry. He looked at the message briefly, locked the phone, and placed it in his pocket without a single explanation. No smile. No clarification. Nothing. And again, silence grew. A quiet, spreading silence. We all retreated to our rooms after dinner. When we entered ours, Azan placed his phone on the dresser and began taking off his shirt. I stood near the bed, trying to gather courage from somewhere inside me. Not courage to fight. Not courage to accuse. Just courage to ask a simple question. But before I could speak, he turned to me and said gently, "I know this house can feel overwhelming at first. Don't let the small things bother you." His voice was kind. But it was also distant. "Who messaged you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't look surprised at the question. He didn't even hesitate. "An old friend," he said simply. "Nothing important." Old friend. Nothing important. I nodded slowly, but the ache inside me deepened. He turned off the main light and lay on his side of the bed. I lay on mine, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft hum of the fan. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. And when I finally closed my eyes, one single thought remained. I married a man whose heart might still be somewhere else. With someone else. And I didn't know how to gently find my place in that space. The next few days passed like slow-moving clouds, soft on the outside, heavy within. Nothing dramatic happened. No arguments. No loud voices. No confrontations. Everything stayed quiet, too quiet. And sometimes silence is louder than words. Azan remained gentle, polite, thoughtful in small ways. He asked if I needed anything. He offered tea in the evenings. He stood up when I entered the room. All the things a husband should do. Yet, there was something missing, something invisible, but present. His eyes. They never stayed on mine long enough. They never softened. Never warmed. It was as if he was being a good husband from duty, not from the heart. One morning, as we ate breakfast, his phone vibrated again. Same notification tone. Same soft buzz that I didn't turn to look. I didn't want to intrude. But I felt his movement, sharp and quick, as he reached for the phone. His mother raised an eyebrow. Lana looked up subtly. I kept my eyes on the teacup in my hands. He read the message silently, his thumb brushing the screen, then he locked the phone again. But I caught a flicker on his face, a small tightening around his mouth. Something unspoken. "Is everything all right?" his mother asked. "Yes," he replied quickly. Too quickly. And then everyone returned to their food, pretending nothing happened. Later that afternoon, I was folding some of my clothes in the room when I heard soft voices outside the door. Not arguing, just talking. Low enough that I wasn't meant to hear them. But the house was old, and sound traveled. It was Lana. "She keeps noticing," she whispered. "She isn't saying anything, but she sees it." Azan sighed. "I know. You have to stop talking to her," Lana said firmly. There was a pause. "I can't just cut her off," he whispered. "I'm not saying it to hurt anyone. I'm saying it because your wife will break if she finds out everything." Silence. Long, heavy silence. Then Azan said quietly, "You think she's already hurting?" I didn't hear Lana's reply. Their voices drifted away, the hallway swallowing the rest of the conversation. I stood frozen in place, holding a neatly folded scarf in my hands. My heart felt soft, fragile, like wet paper. He was worried I was hurting. But he wasn't stopping the thing that was hurting me. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the scarf slip from my fingers onto the floor. The photograph from the drawer flashed in my mind. The message notifications. The hushed voices. The guilt on Lana's face. They weren't trying to hide him from me. They were trying to hide the truth, and that made the hurt sharper. That evening, I found the courage to ask again, gently, without accusation. Azan, is there something you want to tell me? He looked up slowly, a slight surprise in his eyes. About what? Anything, I whispered. He hesitated. Just for a moment. A tiny, delicate moment that held the weight of everything he wasn't saying. Then he smiled softly. Too softly. There's nothing, don't worry. The way he said it felt like placing a blanket over a fire, not to put it out, but to hide its glow. I nodded. Not because I believed him, but because I didn't want to force the truth out of him. Sometimes truth given unwillingly becomes another wound. That night, after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling again. A soft breeze blew through the window, moving the curtains like slow waves. The room felt peaceful, but my heart felt restless. I thought about the woman. Her face. Her smile. The way she leaned into him in the picture. I wondered what her voice sounded like. I wondered if she was kind. If she was still waiting for him. Or if she had moved on, and I was fighting shadows. The next morning, I went downstairs to help Safia in the kitchen. She gave me small tasks, cutting fruit, arranging plates, brewing tea. She watched me carefully, as though evaluating me, or maybe just trying to read my emotions. At one point, she placed a jar on the counter and said, "Marriage takes patience, my dear." Her voice was gentle, but there was a story behind her words. A story she wasn't telling me. I nodded politely. I understand. No, she said softly, shaking her head. You don't. Not yet. But you will. I didn't ask what she meant. Sometimes, older women speak in riddles that make sense only when life unfolds in front of you. Azan left early that day. He didn't tell me where he was going, but something about the way he avoided eye contact told me it wasn't a work-related trip. A part of me wanted to stop him, to ask outright, "Are you going to meet her?" But another part of me, the gentle, quiet part, held me back. If I asked and he said yes, my heart would break. If I asked and he lied, my heart would break too. So I stayed silent. Hours later, I walked past the hallway mirror and caught my reflection. I paused. I looked calm. Still. Almost too composed. But my eyes, they told a different story. A story of a girl trying to carry a truth she wasn't ready for. That evening, while arranging the cushions in the living room, I found something unexpected under the sofa, a small hairpin. Golden. Shiny. Decorated with tiny pearls. Not mine. Not something Safia or Lana would wear either. Their style was completely different. I held it in my palm for a long time. It felt warm, even though it wasn't mine. Was this hers? Did she visit the house? Did she stand where I was standing now? Had she been part of this family before me? 1,000 quiet questions filled my mind. I didn't show the hairpin to anyone. I simply placed it in my drawer, next to the envelope with the picture. 2 pieces of a story that wasn't mine, yet was now shaping my entire life. That night, as I sat on the bed with the drawer slightly open, I felt something inside me slowly changing. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. But I was slowly preparing myself, emotionally, for a truth that might hurt, but would finally give me clarity. And sometimes, clarity matters more than comfort. I lay there under the bed, holding my breath, still frozen, still trying to understand what had just happened. My heart was beating so loudly that I felt sure someone could hear it. The room had become painfully quiet, yet inside me there was a storm I could not calm. I wanted to crawl out. I wanted to stand up and scream. I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. But I could not move. Not yet. Not after what I had heard. I stayed there, listening to the silence, feeling it grow heavier by the second. I felt something warm on my cheek, and only then I realized I was crying. Quiet tears. The kind that fall without sound, without breath, without control. After a few minutes, I heard footsteps again. Slow. Careful. Someone walking toward the bed. My body tensed. Every muscle tightened. My hand curled into the blanket. I was afraid of what I might see, or what I might hear. Then, a soft voice. Are you still there? I know you heard everything. It was the woman. The same woman who had spoken to my husband only moments ago. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Like someone who wasn't surprised. Someone who had expected it. Someone who wasn't afraid of being caught. I didn't want you to find out this way, she said. I felt the bed sink slightly, as if she had sat down. My breath caught in my throat. I know you're scared. And I'm sorry, she whispered. But this truth was waiting. And now you know. For a moment, I thought she might bend down and look at me. I pressed myself against the far corner under the bed, praying the shadow would hide me. But she didn't look. She just sat there. Quiet. Still. Then, after a long pause, she added something that made my whole world shift again. He loves you, in his own way. But his heart has belonged to me for a long time. Her words felt like a knife sliding in slowly, deliberately. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to hear more. I couldn't hear more. But she wasn't done. I'm leaving tomorrow, she said, her voice trembling for the first time. He begged me to stay. But I can't. Not now. Not after he married you. Her breath hitched softly. He said he chose stability. He said he chose peace. He said he needed someone who could give him the life he couldn't have with me. Another pause. I hope you can love him in ways I couldn't. Those last words. They broke me. Because they weren't cruel. They weren't angry. They were sad. Deep, heartbreaking sadness. She stood up slowly. Her footsteps moved toward the door. She opened it gently and slipped out without another word. The door closed. And I was still under the bed. Still trembling. Still unable to move. A part of me wanted to jump up and run. Another part wanted to lie there forever. And somewhere deep inside, a tiny voice whispered. What will you do now? I finally crawled out, my movements heavy and slow. I sat on the floor, holding my knees to my chest, staring at the empty room. The bridal decorations looked blurry through my tears. The soft fairy lights on the wall flickered gently, unaware of the storm inside me. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was lost. This was supposed to be the night I remembered forever. And I would, but not in the way I imagined. I wiped my face, though the tears kept coming back. My chest felt tight, like someone was pressing against it. I whispered to myself, why didn't he tell me? And that question echoed through the room like a ghost. Why? Why marry me? Why smile at me? Why promise me forever if his heart was somewhere else? I sat there for a long time, letting the truth sink in. Letting the weight settle. Letting the silence speak. And in that silence, in that heavy, aching stillness, I realized something. This night wasn't over. Not yet. Because one person still hadn't returned. My husband. I don't know how much time passed. Minutes, maybe hours. The room felt suspended in a quiet that didn't belong to a wedding night. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, staring at the closed door. My thoughts kept circling the same place, like a bird trapped inside a house, hitting the same window over and over. My husband would return. Eventually. He had to. And I didn't know what I would say when he did. A soft click broke the silence. The door handle turned. My heart jumped, not with excitement, but with a trembling fear. My breath grew shallow as the door opened slowly. He stepped in, the faint hallway light outlining his figure. He closed the door behind him gently. Too gently. As if he was afraid of making noise. He looked around the room for a moment, then saw me sitting on the floor. His eyes softened, but there was something else in them, something uneasy. "You're still awake?" he asked quietly. His voice. It sounded normal. Too normal. I didn't answer. My throat felt tight, as if words were caught behind my ribs. He stepped closer, his shoes barely making a sound on the carpet. "Are you all right?" he asked. I finally found my voice, though it came out soft and shaky. "I heard everything." His body stiffened. Completely, like someone had pressed pause on him. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He just stared. I lowered my eyes to the floor. "You don't have to pretend, not anymore." There was a long moment of silence. A painful, stretching moment where the air felt too heavy to breathe. He let out a slow breath, barely audible. "You were under the bed," he whispered. I nodded. He closed his eyes for a second, as if gathering something, courage, maybe. I sat there for a long time, letting the truth sink in. Letting the weight settle. Letting the silence speak. And in that silence, in that heavy, aching stillness, I realized something. This night wasn't over. Not yet. Because one person still hadn't returned. My husband. I don't know how much time passed. Minutes, maybe hours. The room felt suspended in a quiet that didn't belong to a wedding night. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, staring at the closed door. My thoughts kept circling the same place, like a bird trapped inside a house, hitting the same window over and over. My husband would return. Eventually. He had to. And I didn't know what I would say when he did. A soft click broke the silence. The door handle turned. My heart jumped, not with excitement, but with a trembling fear. My breath grew shallow as the door opened slowly. He stepped in, the faint hallway light outlining his figure. He closed the door behind him gently. Too gently. As if he was afraid of making noise. He looked around the room for a moment, then saw me sitting on the floor. His eyes softened, but there was something else in them, something uneasy. "You're still awake?" he asked quietly. His voice. It sounded normal. Too normal. I didn't answer. My throat felt tight, as if words were caught behind my ribs. He stepped closer, his shoes barely making a sound on the carpet. "Are you all right?" he asked. I finally found my voice, though it came out soft and shaky. "I heard everything." His body stiffened. Completely, like someone had pressed pause on him. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He just stared. I lowered my eyes to the floor. "You don't have to pretend, not anymore." There was a long moment of silence. A painful, stretching moment where the air felt too heavy to breathe. He let out a slow breath, barely audible. "You were under the bed," he whispered. I nodded. He closed his eyes for a second, as if gathering something, courage, maybe. Or truth. When he opened them again, his voice was low, tired, almost fragile. "I never wanted you to hear that." I swallowed hard. "But you said it." He sank down to the floor in front of me, leaving a small space between us. He didn't try to touch me. He didn't move closer. He just sat there, hands resting on his knees, looking down. "Yes," he said softly. I said it. Another silence fell between us. I studied his face, the man I had married just hours ago. The man who had smiled during the ceremony. The man who held my hand during the photographs. The man who made promises he seemed afraid to keep. His eyes looked heavier now. As if he had been carrying something far longer than I ever knew. "Why did you marry me?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Why choose me if your heart belonged to someone else?" He rubbed his hands together slowly, a nervous gesture I had seen him do only when he was deeply troubled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he said. I thought time would fix it." "Fix what?" I whispered. He looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw the truth fully in his eyes. "My past." He let out a shaky breath. "She and I," he paused, struggling. "We were together for years. But our families, our plans, our lives, everything kept pulling us apart. We were never stable. We never had peace. And he paused again, his voice trembling. "I wanted a life I could hold on to." He glanced away. "You were that life," he said softly. "You were calm. You were steady. You were everything she and I weren't." His words made me feel warm and cold at the same time. "So you married me because I was safe?" I asked. He closed his eyes. "Because I wanted a future. A family. A home. And with her, everything was chaos." "But you still love her," I said. He didn't deny it. His silence was the answer. My chest tightened, and I felt tears roll down my face again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Why didn't you give me a choice?" He looked at me with pain in his eyes. "Because I was afraid you would walk away. And I didn't want to lose you too." A small, sad smile touched my lips. "You never really had me," I said. "Not fully. Not if your heart was somewhere else." He lowered his head. "I know," he whispered. The room felt fragile, like one wrong word could break us completely. The soft lights on the wall flickered, casting gentle shadows across our faces. Somewhere outside, the wind blew, brushing against the windows like a quiet reminder that the world was still moving, even if ours had stopped. I sat there, wiping my cheeks with the back of my hand. "What do we do now?" I asked softly. He looked up slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." And strangely, those 3 words hurt more than anything else. His words lingered in the air like a faint echo. "I don't know." For a moment, we simply sat there, 2 people on a wedding night, surrounded by flowers and candles and decorations meant to celebrate the beginning of a life together, and yet, it felt like everything around us was holding its breath. I wiped my tears again, though they kept returning, warm and quiet. He watched me, his expression full of worry, guilt, and something softer, something I couldn't name. That a small part of me wanted him to reach out, to wipe my tears, to hold my hands. But he didn't. Maybe he thought he had no right. Maybe he truly didn't. The silence stretched. Finally, I spoke. "Did you bring her here?" He looked startled. "No. She came on her own. She wanted to say goodbye. I didn't expect her to find me. And I didn't expect you to be in the room." "She said you begged her to stay," I whispered. He inhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a moment. "I asked her if she was sure she wanted to leave. I wanted clarity. I needed to know she made peace with it. But then, she said it was time. That I had chosen another path. And she walked away." His voice broke slightly. "Seeing her hurt," he said. "But losing you would hurt more." I looked at him carefully, through the fog of my tears, trying to understand the man sitting in front of me. He wasn't a villain. He wasn't cold. He wasn't cruel. He was conflicted. Torn. Human. And somehow, that made the ache even deeper. "Why didn't you tell me about her when we were engaged?" I asked softly. He let out a slow breath. "Because I thought I could let her go. I thought I could close that chapter. And for a while, I convinced myself I had." "But you hadn't," I whispered. "No," he admitted quietly. "I hadn't. The words settled between us like a truth finally allowed to breathe. I pulled my legs closer and wrapped my arms around them. I felt small. Not rejected, but misplaced, like I was standing in a home that wasn't built for me, but I was expected to live in it anyway. I thought you married me because you loved me, I said, my voice trembling. Because you chose me. I did choose you, he said quickly. But not with your heart, I replied. He didn't deny it. He only lowered his gaze and rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he always did when he felt helpless. I'm sorry, he whispered. I hurt you before our marriage even began. I never wanted that. My throat tightened. Then what do you want now? He hesitated. It was a long, quiet hesitation that made me feel like he was searching inside himself for an answer he had never dared to articulate. I want to try, he finally said. I want to build this marriage with you. I want to leave the past behind, truly behind. But I know I've made this very hard for you. I studied him for a long moment. His words were sincere, but sincerity felt too light compared to the heaviness inside me. How do I trust you after this? I asked. He looked at me, his eyes heavy with remorse. By letting me earn it, slowly. Patiently. Honestly. If you let me. The room softened then, just a little. His voice wasn't demanding. He wasn't asking me to forget, or pretend, or justify his choices. He was simply offering something fragile. A beginning. Not a perfect one. But a beginning. I exhaled shakily. I don't know if I can, I admitted. Not now. Maybe not soon. He nodded gently. I understand. The wind brushed the window again, and the soft fairy lights flickered like fireflies trapped inside the room. For the first time since I heard the voices, I felt the weight of exhaustion settle into my bones. I leaned my head back against the edge of the bed. I feel like I lost something before I ever had it, I said quietly. He swallowed hard. I know. And I'm to blame. His voice cracked at the end, and I realized he was hurting too, not the same way, but deeply all the same. Losing someone he loved. Hurting someone he married. Standing between two shattered truths. We sat in silence for a long while. No anger. No raised voices. Just two hearts trying to make sense of a night that had gone terribly wrong. Finally, he said, do you want me to sleep somewhere else tonight? The question stilled me. My wedding night. A night I had imagined for so long. A night filled with laughter, closeness, comfort. And instead, he was asking if I wanted him far away. My lips parted, but no answer came. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know what would hurt less, or what would hurt more. I don't know, I whispered. He nodded slowly. Whatever you choose. I'll respect it. He stood up quietly then, moving toward the small couch in the corner of the room. He didn't touch me. Didn't come closer. He simply took a pillow and blanket, placed them gently on the couch, and sat down. He didn't lie down. He didn't sleep. He just sat there, hands folded, staring at the floor as if keeping watch over a night that had already broken both of us. I watched him from the corner of my eye. His shoulders were slumped. His face was tired. His eyes were glassy, as though he, too, was holding back tears. And in that moment, I felt a strange blend of sorrow and tenderness. This man loved someone else. But he was trying not to lose me. I curled up on the floor, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. Not because I was cold, but because I needed something to hold on to, some kind of softness in a night that felt anything but soft. And before I closed my eyes, I whispered something I didn't expect myself to say. Please, don't leave the room. He looked up, surprised. Then he nodded, silently. He stayed. On the couch. Still. Quiet. Respectful. And for the first time that night, I fell asleep, not because the pain had faded, but because my body had no strength left to hold it.